Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Rift Talks. As usual, I'm your host, Trooper, and today we've got a great episode for you. There's been a lot of stuff going on, especially, with the NA LCS, or just the LCS. I keep calling it NA and EU. I'm old school. But with the LCS playoffs going on, there's a lot of good stuff to cover and a lot of good stuff to talk about, so I'm super excited to get into all this. As usual, we're going to start off with a team fight breakdown. This one is from SK Gaming versus Splice in the LEC last week. Then we'll hop into, breaking down all the quarterfinal action from the two quarterfinals in NA. Then we'll get a good look ahead at the LEC and the playoff picture, a quick review of last week and what happened there. Then I'll have a hot take for you, and we'll get into the Teamfight Tactics at the end. So if you're looking for TFT information, stay tuned. You don't want to miss that. I have a lot of cool stuff to talk about. But let's jump right in to the Teamfight breakdown. So this was a game that was really going in SK's favor. Now let's just pause it here, and we can kind of get a look at what happened. So SK had started the dragon, and essentially they were trying to bait. They were trying to get this dragon done quickly. It's an elder dragon, as you can see. They were basically in a solid position throughout this whole game against Splice. Like, even though they weren't necessarily winning the game by a lot, like, they were still heavily into this game. They weren't down very much. They were right in the thick of it. And they actually started off really, really strong in this game. But here is where they lose it. So you see they took the dragon down to about half health, and Genax and Selfmade are going to back out the back of the Dragon Pit. Now here, I want you to pay attention to Genax. He's flanking around, hoping that he can get something going. But essentially what happens is Splice just turns on him. They're going to chase him out there. And you see a huge steal comes through right away on the side of Splice. So they're able to take that dragon, even though SK put in all this investment. Now Genax is going to get bursted down. A gigantic recon ult is just going to murder everybody. And that's the game. Like, right there is the game, essentially. At this point, Splice is going to push forward, take a bunch of kills, and it's pretty much over. So let's pause and kind of walk through this a little bit slower. So like I was saying, you see Selfmade and Genax back out the back. Now Selfmade comes around to join the rest of his team. You see the Ashe ult come down, gets a stun, but it's unfortunately on Vizisachi, so it's not really going to do a whole lot because he's very, very tanky at this point on that gangplank. A little bit of poke is traded back and forth. Norscarin and Xerxes are here, and they figure out right at this point, Splice, like, we can either try and take this dragon or we can bait it. So Xerxes has been really, really good at stealing dragons all season long and stealing neutral objectives in general. So they're going to kind of back out, let SK take a little bit more damage from this Elder Drake. And then you see here, Xerxes is going to dive in to try and secure this, and he's going to do it successfully. Meanwhile, in the backline, Norscarin and Vizisachi are just starting to destroy Genax. They chunk him for a significant amount of damage. There, Xerxes gets the damage, gets the Drake, and now this fight is in a real bad spot for SK because Splice has the Elder Dragon buff, which is huge, especially for fighting. It's almost better than the Baron buff, or it actually is. So now Genax is kind of stuck out at the back there. He's going to dive in and try and take out Xerxes, but unfortunately, he's not really able to do that fast enough. Or at all, actually. And essentially what's going to happen here is this Norscarin dive CC chain. Like, this is gigantic. He knocks up two players on the side of SK. Both Crowdshot and Sakura are just immediately destroyed. They get deleted instantaneously. And at this point, the fight is over. There's nothing. I mean, Selfmade is the one who gets out. He misses the smite, which is gigantic. He gets out with his life. He actually made a lot of misplays, I guess you could say, in this game. Even though he's 5-1-8, he missed quite a few ults. He missed that smite, and it was just really unfortunate. And this allows Splice to push and end the game. So if you're going to take a neutral objective, if you're going to start that, A, you have to make sure that you can secure it, and B, you really, really have to make sure that your jungler can hit smite, because missing that smite allowed for so much extra damage to come through on the side of Splice that just made it essentially impossible for SK to win that fight, especially with that Recon dual CC there. That was just absolutely beautiful. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that. It was a quick breakdown of that game. It was actually one of the better games in Europe this week. We'll get to Europe in a little bit, but there was a lot of, I don't even know what to call it. Like, just, it hurt to watch some of those games. But let's get right into the LCS quarterfinal action, because I know that's what a lot of you guys are going to be interested in. So obviously there was two series that took place this weekend: TSM versus Clutch and CLG versus Optic. Both series were not the easiest to predict. I think it was pretty realistic to have either team coming out in either series as at least for potentially. And it showed, especially in the TSM Clutch series. I know there's obviously a lot more TSM fans than there are Clutch fans, but TSM was unable to secure it. So let's get into game one. Now, this game was just really a death by 1,000 cuts almost. Like, TSM was able to get kills in key situations, but they weren't able to take the objectives. So one thing that Clutch did in this game and in every single game was really control the objectives. They got first tower every single game. They got Rift Herald every single game, which didn't only give them one tower, but it really chunked down a second tower, making it easier for them to take that as well. The other thing that I want you guys to take a note of is Huni and Cody Sun. So the Sivir and Rumble caused massive problems all game long. Like, just all game long. And here's actually, I think this is from game 2, where it was an even game. It was looking good, and then this happens. Like, just absolute destruction. Basically, TSM thought that they had a numbers advantage, and they didn't. Instead, they got absolutely wrecked. Like, here they came in, and they thought, hey, we have a fight. We can win this fight and kind of secure the game. And instead, they end up losing the fight, losing Baron. It's just super bad. You see the teleports come through? This is this fight again. So Rumble drops the equalizer. Huge. Does a ton of damage. Then he's going to hit everybody with his flamethrower. Demonte comes in, does insane work. Like, this was just on Kiana. He is by far, I mean, he was the first player to get a win with her in the LCS regular season, and he showed why. Like, he was so good on this champion. And it was just impossible for TSM to do anything after that. I mean, this was an even game until they threw right there. They engaged the fight. They thought they had numbers. They didn't really take into account to Huni teleport, and they had to make sure, really, that he is not on that Rumble champion. But they failed to do that in game 4. So game 3, let's hop into that. And essentially, this was a much more even game. Like, you see, they actually banned the Rumble away. Now, they still let Cody Sun have Sivir, but it didn't actually matter because Ven had an insane game on Xayah. So right here, it's pretty even, and everything is going okay. But Spica gets caught out multiple times. Actually, Spica had a terrible series, to be completely honest with you guys. Like, he just did not play well at all. But this was the play here where Clutch maybe got a little bit overzealous. They went for a Baron. They thought that they could take it. And instead, you have Sven just going absolutely off. So there's a ton of damage that comes through right away there. And you just see Sven just going completely crazy. He manages to take out 2 guys. Then he's going to turn here. Cody Sun thought that they could take it, but unfortunately, the Xayah was too strong. Kills the Azir, kills Sivir on Cody Sun, and then Demonte came back in to try and help. He should have probably run earlier. Instead, it ends up being a pentakills for Sven, and he was just too strong the rest of the game. Like, he was just way too far ahead. There was literally nothing that they could do at that point. They just took team fights with relative ease. You see them here just diving tower. They don't care. Broken Blade had a pretty good game on the Aatrox. It was just too much. And it's just a slow death from here. I mean, Clutch tried to withstand it. They tried to kind of fight, but the big problem was that, look at that, like, pause right here really fast. Like, look at Sven's items. He's already got the Essence Reaver, the Rapid Fire Cannon, the Infinity Edge. He's got 6 kills. He's got a whole Rapid Fire Cannon over top of the enemy Sivir. Like, that's just too much damage that's going to come through, especially because Ven actually played really, really well this game. So Clutch was just kind of, you know, between a rock and a hard place, so to speak. They had absolutely no ability to come back once they had lost that fight. But unfortunately for TSM and their fans, it did not discourage them. Clutch was able to turn things around quite impressively in game 4. So let's take a quick look at what happened in game 4 here. So again, notice Huni gets the Rumble. Not good. They did pick they did pick away the Sivir from Cody Sun, which was, you know, they thought maybe that's enough. Maybe we don't need to take the Rumble as well. But this was actually a gigantic misplay. So essentially, a kill comes down here. Rumble goes too hard. Huni gets taken out, but look how much damage he did. Now, they think that they've won this fight, and they have the man advantage. But here, Spica decides that he's going to engage all by himself. There's nobody there to help. He just wanted to make sure that they got more people. And instead, he ends up getting taken down. Now, instead of a 1-for-0 and the ability to push an objective, it's a 1-for-1. And TSM is not really done. They think here that they can turn this fight around. So you see Smoothie throw his CC out, hits Lyra, doesn't really do much, and they're going to re-engage onto this. And when they do, it doesn't go well for them at all. So you see them coming back here. Clutch is going for this dragon, and instantaneously, Vulcan and Demonte just decided to stay back a little bit. They chunked down Smoothie quite a bit. Demonte gets down a bit of damage, but he gets taken out. So again, TSM now thinks they're in a really good spot. But Lyra and Cody-san just went ham on the Kai'Sa. Cody-san was able to get into the back line, and with Lyra on Rek'Sai and having that red buff, red machete Rek'Sai, he just does so much damage, especially early on in this game. Like, this isn't even at the 20-minute mark, that they're just able to delete the whole team. And that's it. From this point on, TSM was never really in the game. Cody-san was able to do an insane amount of damage. Clutch kept getting, dragons and neutral buffs, and it was just impossible for TSM to come back at this point. So if you're a TSM fan, this is kind of disheartening, because you think like, oh, maybe we can do something. And again, look, they pick off the Rumble, but look how much damage he does before he goes down. Like, he's just deleting half of the health bars of every single member on TSM. And then from there, it's super easy for Clutch to kind of follow up on all that damage and make sure that they get somebody. Broken Blade here thinks he might be able to stay alive, is able to take out one. And this was actually a fight that TSM was able to win, but it was just never by enough that they were able to fully claw back into the game. Their health bars were always too low to go get a Baron or try something like that along those lines. They were always just really, really stuck, essentially. And just look at that Kai'Sa, the exact opposite of last game, 7-0-3. It's just an incredible performance all series long, honestly, from Cody-san. I think he only died the once in that one pentakill we saw in game 3. I'm pretty sure maybe he died one more time in that game, but he was just not dying. And again, the Rumble ult acting as an engage, and look at how much damage. Bjergsen, half health instantaneously. Broken Blade, half health. And, Cody just does the rest. So honestly, it was a really good performance from Clutch Gaming overall. They managed to convincingly win. Like, they were definitely the better team on Saturday. For TSM fans, it's hard. It's a tough pill to swallow. We're going to get to that a little bit more in the hot take, but definitely disappointing. I think a lot of people were hoping and thinking that TSM was going to come out on top of that series, and instead, Clutch Gaming takes them out and moves into the semifinals. So let's get into the second series, CLG versus Optic. Now, this series was far less about the massive explosive moments like we just saw in the TSM versus Clutch series. Instead, this series was more a death by 1,000 cuts type of deal. Like, CLG just bled Optic dry, except in this first game. This first game was by far the most interesting, because for most of the game, Optic had control. They had the lead. They were the ones who were the aggressors. They were getting, they got like a 20-minute Baron. Nice dive here to immediately take out Dokla, sorry. But apart from a couple of kills here and there that kind of kept CLG in the game, it was essentially Optic who was controlling the objectives. They were controlling the map very well. The big problem here, and I'm not a big fan of calling people out, but the big problem in this first game was Crown, and honestly, over the course of the whole series, were Crown and Arrow. Both of these guys got caught out so many times in just silly ways that when Optic should have had an advantage and should have been able to push and should have been able to do something productive and really close the game on CLG, CLG was able to get that one pick, find one of them out of position, and really secure a delay. They were able to stall things out. And because of that, Optic was never able to seal the deal. They were never able to get the win. Ruin, I love how aggressively he plays. Whether it's on Camille or Poppy, like, he just plays so aggressively up in that top lane. The man has no fear. It's fantastic to watch. But essentially, like, this first game, 100% should have gone to Optic. And honestly, if it had, who knows? Because games 2 and 3, Optic looked defeated. Like, for you to play a 50-minute game, being the lead, anybody who's played League of Legends knows this. If you're winning an entire game, you're in first place, you've been winning all game long, things are going great for you, and then you just do some really dumb things at the end that throw the game, you just feel so tilted at that point. Like, you don't really know what you want to do. And unfortunately, that's really what did happen to Optic here. They were in control. They were getting the dragons. They were getting the turrets. They were getting everything. They had, at the 20-minute mark, they had a Baron. They were pushed in. They had tier 2 turrets down. They were on the inhibitor turrets. And then inevitably, it would be Crown, or it would be, I think it was Crown at the end of the game. At the beginning of the game, it was more, I think it was Arrow at the end of the game. In the beginning of the game, it was Crown. But they would just get caught out. And when they got caught out, then all of a sudden, CLG could stall. And then one final team fight at the end where CLG is able to win with a couple of members left alive, and they have a minute to push down and win the game, and they did just that. So this first game was really, really disheartening. If you're an Optic Gaming fan, I mean, Meteos did everything he could to kind of create that pressure, make the smart decisions, get them going, and get into the right places to kind of control those objectives and control the neutral goal that you can get and take an advantage. Like, look at this. This is a 23-minute Baron, and it's just too much, unfortunately. Game 2 was just, they were just bled out. I mean, and again, to my point, Arrow giving up first blood immediately. This is, I think, game 3, and it's just like, it's just more of the same. Like, Arrow getting caught, Crown getting caught, giving up some silly deaths. Here, Optic thinks they have an actual kill, and they do get the kill, to be fair, but Stixay's able to turn that on them, and he almost gets 2. He was smart not to chase that, but it was just too much pressure. Essentially on Optic, and I think after they kind of fell so hard in that first game, in a game that they should have won. I mean, CLG had a bad composition. They had bad positioning in the early game. They were behind, and they weren't able to do it. So after that, Optic kind of fell apart. You could see the deflation, especially with Crown getting picked out there, Arrow, getting picked out there right away. It's just like I don't know what to say. I mean, honestly, I thought Optic had a chance. They were playing great in the tiebreakers at the last weekend, but this weekend just wasn't their day, I guess. And it's just too bad. But yeah, you see Stixay here, like CLG they knew after that first game. You could tell they just knew that they had won. They felt super confident. They were making great aggressive plays. Power of Evil played fantastic. They tried to take him off the Azir after 2 great games on that champion, but he's a great Sivir player as well. Like, this was one of the best mid laners in Europe while he was there. Like, this guy's no joke, and he really showed why he has that reputation. Like, they banned out his main guy, and he played just as well in the center. Maybe not just as well, but still very, very well. And that was all she wrote, really. So Optic is done, and TSM is done. They're out for the season, and I don't think either of them have a chance to make Worlds. TSM might, but I don't think so. So let's take a look at the next upcoming semifinal matchups. We have C9, CLG. So Team Liquid, basically the way this works, guys, is Team Liquid got to pick, and they decided to play Clutch Gaming. So that kind of puts the pressure on them. I mean, obviously, as the first place seed, you have pressure on you, but you have to win now because you chose to play this team first. You didn't want to play CLG. Meanwhile, Cloud9 will be playing CLG in a rematch from the tiebreakers that, honestly, Cloud9 won very, very convincingly. So Cloud9's got to feel good about this. They just beat this team last weekend, and they did it in convincing fashion. So there's an extra week here to prepare. And CLG this time, the tiebreakers were not necessarily a predicted scenario. You didn't know that you were going to be playing that game, and it's only a 1-game situation. So there's a lot more working in CLG's favor here, where they can take that loss, they can learn from it, and they have more time to prepare specifically for Cloud9, their team compositions, their strategies, their players and personnel, etc. But I think, the betting man would go Team Liquid, Cloud9 in the finals. And we'll see CLG and Clutch Gaming playing in the 3rd place constellation match. Now, obviously, that could turn out to be false, but that is the Rift Talk prediction, at least, for what we're going to see going down this weekend. But honestly, both series were a lot of fun to watch. I mean, the first one was much more explosive, TSM versus Clutch. There was a lot of great plays that kind of blew the games open, but it was also very frustrating to watch TSM just get out-macroed all over the map. Meanwhile, CLG versus Optic, the first game was fantastic, and then it just you could kind of tell that Optic was deflated after that point, and they didn't play the same way, and unfortunately, it just didn't work out for them. I mean, they kept trying to make plays, even in the 3rd game once they were done, or down significantly, They still tried to make plays. It just wasn't enough. It wasn't sufficient to get a victory. And honestly, you have to tip your hat to CLG. They played really, really well. They survived in the game that they were down and that they didn't get what they wanted. And then in the other 2 games, they showed they were significantly better and the better team, for sure. So congratulations to CLG and Clutch for advancing. But let's now move on to Europe, because Europe is entering the final week of the regular season. So every match matters at this point. There's a lot still on the line. Let's take a look at what happened last week first, really quick. And then we can kind of get ahead and look at the playoffs. So Schalke beat Misfits. That was a head scratcher of a game. SK beat Vitality. Again, another one that just, those two games were honestly like painful. Like the amount of insanity that was going on there was just weird. They were fun, they were entertaining, but from an analytical standpoint, they were big yikes. Fnatic destroyed Excel pretty handily. You could tell they wanted their revenge from being upset earlier in the season. Splice beat out Origin. Origin, that was it was too bad because Origin really did look pretty good for the first bit of that game, but unfortunately they just weren't able to close the door on Splice. And G2 doing G2 things, decimated Rogue. They looked fantastic. They have all season. They've got to be the LEC favorites at this point. Your mid-season invitational champs, like they played great. So G2 looking in perfect form heading into the playoffs, which has got to scare most of Europe. Day 2. The Splice versus SK game, obviously that's from the Teamfight breakdown that we broke down a little bit earlier in this episode. And, Splice was able to win off the back of that. Rogue beat Schalke, which was huge, and I'll get into why just in a minute. Origin beating Excel, that was a necessary victory. Big necessary victory for them because now they've secured, basically Excel and Misfits are out. Like there's nothing they can do. Misfits was not going to beat G2. They got clapped. And Fnatic beating Vitality, again, pretty handily, makes this playoff picture super interesting. Because now, this is fantastic. Now you've got a real heated bottom of the playoff bracket entering this final week. So instead of this final week being meaningless and, everything's pretty much set up and blah, 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 instead of that, we've got a really close bottoms of the standings. So if you pull up the playoff standings here, or the regular season standings, I should say. So G2 Esports has got first on lock. Fnatic and Splice, they've got to battle and figure out which one of them is going to take second place. They both obviously are going to want that bye. So we'll see which one of them is able to secure that. Schalke, pretty confident. They're in. They can't lose their spot. Where things get really interesting is that 5 through 7. Origin, Vitality, Rogue, and even to a lesser extent, SK. I mean, SK has been having an awful season. I don't expect them to pull off a miraculous 2 victories, but it's possible. Meanwhile, Rogue is only 1 game out. And if Vitality or Origin go 0-2 and Rogue goes 2-0 or even 1-1, we're going to end up in another tiebreaker situation, which would be really cool. Like to have tiebreakers in both the LCS and the LEC in the same split. I mean, those matches are so hype. One game determines the course of your season. And you know that all of these teams, all 3 of those teams now, are definitely going to be prepping as hard as they can for this weekend. And I think a lot of them are going to probably prep for potential tiebreaker situations too, because it's better to be a little bit over-prepared than it is to, end up in that situation and not have thought about it, not have prepared for it, and then all of a sudden you're in a tiebreaker and the other team's ready for you, but you're not ready for them because you can guarantee that Rogue will be making sure that they've got their I's dotted and their T's crossed heading into a potential tiebreaker situation because for them it's likely. What I'm worried about is that the other teams might think, well, we're ahead. We have the playoff spot right now. We need to concern ourselves with the 2 games, make sure we get the wins, and then we don't have to worry about a tiebreaker. And while I agree, yes, that is definitely something you should do, you also have to be ready for a potential loss or something to not go your way, or the other team to outplay you, and then all of a sudden you're in this tiebreaker situation. If you haven't planned for it or thought about it at all, that might be the end of your season. So I'm super excited for Europe this weekend. Honestly, I'm very excited to watch. Even though it's just regular season play, I'm super excited to watch that go down. And obviously the semifinals in North America. It's another great weekend of League of Legends. It's going to be sad in a couple weeks once all this kind of comes down. Kind of comes to a stop and we don't really have the competitive play on a weekly basis anymore because, the summer split's super exciting. It gears everybody up for Worlds. The teams that win are going to Worlds guaranteed. At this point, it looks like, Cloud9, Team Liquid and G2 are going to be the two most probable victors, and they've already got their World spots guaranteed essentially. So it's not like, we're going to see some Cinderella team come from the bottom and guarantee themselves a spot at Worlds, but still very interesting developments in both regions, honestly, and it should be a lot of fun to watch League of Legends this weekend. So if you're a League fan, you're not going to want to go anywhere this weekend. If you work, call in sick, and if you have, social plans, cancel them. This is more fun. All right. So Well, let's get into a hot take here really quick. TSM. They're who I want to talk about today because honestly, they obviously have the most rabid fan base in League of Legends. They're the most popular team. They are the original TSM. Like Optic Gaming to Call of Duty is TSM to League of Legends in a sense. Like they were the team that built their whole brand through this game. They didn't exist before it. They have an incredibly large and passionate fan base. Everybody's cheering for them. They've had some fan favorite players. They had Doublelift at one point. They have Bjergsen. They've had Bjergsen for a long time, and he's obviously one of the favorite players for all North American fans. Definitely one of the more talented players in the region. But something has been going wrong. Things have not been going well for them as of late. When you think of TSM in League of Legends, you think of a championship team. You think of the best team in North America. You think a team that is at least contending for the top spot every single split. And that has just not been the case as of late. Like I want to pull up their recent placings here for you guys because it's kind of disheartening. So you go back to 2017, look at that. They win the summer playoffs. They win the summer season. They win Rift Rivals and versus Europe, right? They destroyed Unicorns of Love. Obviously, they only came 5th at the MSI that year, but they won the spring, playoffs, and regular season. Like they were the team to beat. Now, obviously, that season they had Doublelift. But I mean, if you go back further than 2017, there was a lot of gold on there too. The only team that was ever giving them a problem was Cloud9. It was the only team that they ever had to worry about was that original Cloud9 God Squad that made Meteos and High and Lemonation and all these guys and Balls, and like these guys were basically their only competition, right? And now that's just like they've fallen so far. So they did terribly at Worlds that year. They got rid of Doublelift. And since then, they've come second place a couple times. Like they came second at Rift Rivals, but they lost pretty badly. Second in the spring playoffs, losing to Team Liquid. Second in the North American Regional Finals, losing to Cloud9. Third in the LCS Spring. Third in the summer playoffs last year. Second in the spring playoffs. Fourth during the summer here. So they were kind of falling off. And then even worse, like they get eliminated in the first round, which is, they haven't done that since spring of last year, where funnily enough, they also lost to Clutch Gaming 3-1. But the weird thing here, and the one thing that I kind of want to discuss a little bit before I get into the rest of it, is the jungle situation. Look how many junglers are on that page. You have Svenskeren, you have Mike Young, you have Grig, you have Acadian, and now you have Spica. So that's 5. Right before this, if you scroll down a little bit further on this page, this is from lol.gamepedia, by the way. But if you were to go down further on this, you would see Santorin and Amazing. They've had 7 junglers. 7 in like the last 4 years. It's ridiculous. What is going on there? I think a lot of people think that Bjergsen is the best mid in North America. And up until this split, honestly, I would say it's hard to disagree with that. He's played fantastic. This was, I think, the first split he's had in the North American region where he wasn't an obvious, at least strong candidate for an MVP. This split was not that for him, unfortunately. And when they're rotating through so many junglers, at a certain point, you have to ask, like, what is causing this? Why is it that you get all these players? Like Smoothie was on Cloud9 and was heralded as a great shot caller. Shot calling was terrible this split. You have all these junglers that are aggressive, mechanically talented, doing all this good stuff. And they play unaggressively. They play poorly. And they just don't seem to perform anywhere near the level that people expect them to. What is going on internally? Now, I know, we'll never hear it from TSM. They're a very professional organization. The one place you do have to give them a lot of credit is they don't air their dirty laundry. You're never going to get, all of the inner fights and all that sort of stuff in TSM. Like they've got most of that stuff locked down now. They've had a couple of that come out, a couple of those things come out in the past, but I don't expect that that's something we're going to see. But I think there's real questions need to be asked about Bjergsen, and he's the only player that's been on this team the whole time. Everybody else has been changed. Like Hanser's gotten rotated out, and there's so many excuses that come through for this team. Well, it's hard to play top lane when you don't have any jungle help, and no, you have to learn to win one by one. Like, in an extent, it almost feels like the old TSM where they just had Dyrus up on an island, and he was just expected to live and survive. And then, towards the end of his career, despite, don't get me wrong, Dyrus was one of the best top laners in the game for a long time. He was fantastic. or at least in the West. There's some good Korean ones, but they're treating all these other top laners like they can play like Dyrus did, in the sense that they can just leave him alone up there and he'll survive. He'll be fine. And that's just not what's been happening. Like, top lane's been rotated out. The jungle seems to be the easy scapegoat. Replacing double lift, TSM gets a lot of crap for that, but being able to take Sven and Mithy, I mean, Biofrost was not great. Like, he's not a bad player, don't get me wrong. He performed pretty well this weekend with CLG, but he's not what he used to be. I mean, he's not like a Mithy level talent. Mithy was one of the best supports in the West, hands down. So it makes sense to take that gamble, but this really hasn't paid off for them. I mean, Bjergsen is essentially the team. Everybody goes, oh, well, it's Bjergsen and it's his team and he's the star. But then he'll defer to other people in terms of pick order. He won't necessarily go for his strongest pick in the meta. He'll say, oh, I'll let other people take their picks and I'll pick last. I'll counter pick or what have you. And that can work. But at least this split, he was not the Bjergsen we're accustomed to seeing that just took over games. And I mentioned in a top 5 video I did last week that for them to win this game or this series, they needed Bjergsen to go off. They needed him to be like the old Bjergsen. And he just wasn't that. But what are they going to do at this point? Because they've gone through so many junglers. I find it difficult to believe that every single one of these junglers has been the problem. Like, it's just at a certain point you have to look at something in TSM that is causing so many junglers to stutter and fail. So many top laners to become mediocre when they were good, if not great. There's something rotten in Denmark here. I'm not entirely sure what it is. Obviously I don't have inner access to the team, but something in TSM is not working and they've got to figure it out. I mean, I know Reginald is super passionate. I have full confidence that guy's doing everything he can to figure out what's not working. But the gap between TSM and the rest of the teams is shrinking. Like, TSM used to be able to offer players way more money than any other team. That gap is shrinking. There's more organizations that have significant capital investments and can pay players competitive salaries. There is no longer the same prestige associated. Like before, at the beginning of League of Legends, and even up until a couple of years ago, TSM was by far the #1 desired team. They had the best track record. They had the biggest brand and prestige and all this sort of stuff. But now, you have Cloud9, Team Liquid as premier organizations that have actually done better in other games than TSM has. TSM hasn't really done that well in a bunch of the other games they've tried. I mean, they've got a decent player in Fortnite with Zexro, and they've done okay, but they've never really been able to get the same level of success across other titles. So you have these other organizations that are growing, becoming more prestigious, having access to larger fan bases across a larger swath of games. You have Optic in the LCS now, who's another like elite top tier organization, despite all the nonsense that happened with them this year in Infinite Gaming, their parent company. TSM's losing their grip on the top spot, on that most prestigious organization. And what I'm scared of is, will TSM become the Knicks? The organization with all the old name, the old clout, they used to be the best. They were this and that, and they're just a shell of that. And that would be really, really sad. Because I know how much Reginald cares about his League of Legends team and their success. I know how much that means to TSM, and I know what the TSM brand has done for esports. Like, they were huge, and they still are huge. But at a certain point, they're going to start hemorrhaging fans to other more successful organizations. Esports isn't, at least traditionally, hasn't been a thing where people have kept lifelong fans. Fans are there for the players, more so than the organization. TSM has been able to kind of stave that off and have real organizational fans. But if a couple more poor performances like this, and I wonder how much longer that will last. And then this is all especially troubling because of the advantages that they still have to this day, which are that they have Bjergsen as a resident, so they can import other players, right? That's why they were able to do the Sven and Mithy thing. They wouldn't have been able to do that if Bjergsen still counted as an import. So that gives them access to a wider talent pool. And then also, they have Bjergsen on a discount. They're not paying him what they need to pay him. Like, he could definitely get more money if he just went onto the open market and said, I'm signing the biggest number that somebody gives me. Like, I'll take the biggest check I can. He'd get paid more than he is on TSM currently. So with the extra money that they're saving from Bjergsen, the extra import spot, the fact that they're not winning right now is very disheartening and alarming. Especially because you consider, like, you look at some of these other teams that have won, and you look at TSM even in 2017. What did they do? They signed Double Lift. Like, okay, we're just going to put together a team of the best players. We'll pay them what we need to. And we're going to assemble this group of proven winners, proven champions. These guys are all top tier players in the game. We're going to put them all on one team. We're going to build like a super team, essentially, and we're going to go from there. Haven't done that. The closest they did was the Bjergsen and Double Lift thing. And it worked. I mean, they had a terrible performance at Worlds, sure. Excuse me. And the Sven and Mithy bot lane, that was a good move on their part too. I fully understand why Reginald did that. You know, even though now hindsight's 2020, so a lot of people go, oh, but Double Lift went on to go do all these things. Double Lift hadn't really won anything apart from the TSM stuff then. Like, he wasn't the accomplished player he is on the international and even the national stage then, right? But now those decisions don't look as good, and TSM's left in this place where they have the money and they're slowly losing their prestige and their clout. They're definitely not, like, by far leaps and bounds the #1 choice for a young and up-and-coming player anymore. There was a time where that was the case. So I don't know what this brand and this team is going to do in this organization, but I think they really, really got to do a good internal look and try and figure out what is going wrong with this team. Why can't they win? Why can't they get all the best players and just put together a nice team? And when they do that, what's going wrong? Like, especially on the jungle side. I don't know if it's Bjergsen demanding things. I don't know if it's, you know, maybe the team being like, hey, you know, if you help Bjergsen, he's the best player, maybe we'll win for sure. Like, I don't know what's going on there. But at this point, you know, 1 happens, 2 is a coincidence maybe, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. At this point, there's clearly something corrupted inside the system that is really messing up junglers. So I don't know what they're going to do to fix it, but for TSM fans everywhere, I hope they do. That was the hot take. So we've got about 20 minutes left here. We're going to dive into some Teamfight Tactics. Now, this last week, the patch was pretty small. It wasn't a gigantic patch. So essentially what they've decided to do, and I actually really, really like this approach, is they've decided that every 2 weeks, so with the regular League of Legends patch, they're going to do a big TFT patch. And then on the off weeks, so like this last week that just happened, they're going to do a much smaller tweaking sort of patch, right? So that's what happened last week. And honestly, I think a lot of the tweaks they made were great. I think the game is in a pretty healthy state right now. There's a lot of comps you can win with. There's a lot of cool, unique combinations and synergies, and I'll get into that here in a second. But first, let's run down the patch notes of what went down. So they fixed the Blitzcrank bug again, thankfully. Although if you don't have a Blitzcrank on your team, it's not thankfully because it's super annoying. But they now the team actually focuses the unit that Blitzcrank pulls. And honestly, especially at the end of the game, if he's in the back line, it's very common for him to get 2 pulls. So that really affects how you position your team overall, because you almost always need like a blitz bait unit. Somebody that they can just you can throw out there, and Blitzcrank will pull them instead of the guy that you actually want to survive and actually want to have doing all of your damage. So that's something to keep in mind. Blitz will instantly delete units now with the help of his teammates. You want to make sure that you have somebody to take that pull, especially if you see other people running Blitzcranks. At least they buffed her, not enough. She's still bad. Don't buy Elise ever. Just don't do it. Like, maybe if you see 3, you know, in the minion rounds, if you see 3 of them, sure, then throw her out there as a really early game level 2. Other than that, don't do it. She's just terrible. Karthus got huge nerfs, thank God. That Void 6 Sorcerer comp was absolutely ridiculous. And Karthus was a big part of that. Basically, you could just throw 1 Karthus out there, because he would do 400 damage to 5 targets. Now he does 350 damage to 5 targets. Then at level 2, he used to do 700. They nerfed that by 100. And at level 2, he hit 9 people, which is essentially a full team. Like, it's very, very rare that you see a TFT game with 10 people. That requires you to hit max level and get a Force of Nature. Or just have 2 Force of Natures, but that's kind of weird. You don't see that very often either. So essentially, Karthus took a big hit because now he only hits 7 people. You have to get him to level 3 to hit all 9, and like, let's be honest, you're never going to get a level 3 5-star. If you do, please send me a screenshot or a picture of that or a VOD or whatever you have, because I would die. That would be hilarious to see. Kale. they nerfed her slightly. They require her to get more mana. So Kale was, again, like Karthus, she was so strong. Like, your comp didn't need to have any synergy with Kale. You just throw her out there. Especially if you have some items for her, just throw her out there. She would get massive amounts of ults. They would be critical. They would save people, especially if you get her to level 2. She would just be saving everybody. People wouldn't die. It was super frustrating. So now just this slight nerf to her required mana to cast an ability, I think is really, really good. I think it puts her in a much healthier place. She's still a great unit, but she's no longer like, if you just have her, you can instantaneously get top 4 sort of thing. Like, you need to have items on her or have her at level 2. It's not just like, oh, I have a level 1 Kale, just let me throw her out there. Pyke nerfed his stun duration by half a second at all ranks. I think this was a pretty good play. I think he was honestly one of the strongest 2-cost units. Very, very powerful. That massive AoE stun was really, really impactful. It did a lot of damage, and more so than the damage, you were just stun locked for so long, and he would stun your whole team essentially, which would really make the difference in some rounds. So Pyke being nerfed, overall, I think a good thing. He's in a healthier spot now. Rengar, this is kind of sad because they buffed him twice. They tried to get Rengar into the meta, and then they realized everybody was just abusing Rengar, and so they nerfed him pretty hard, especially at level 3 and level 2. They nerfed his ability attack speed bonus, so he's not a monster anymore. Honestly, he's kind of back to being very meh. 6 assassin comps are really not doing very well right now, so I just don't see a reason to pick him up. If you're going to run wild, it's better to have the Nidalee and the Warwick, and then maybe you can, and the Gnar, and you can kind of translate that into a Shyvana comp still. Shyvana, Aurelion Sol is still very, very, very strong. So Rengar is still the odd wild out, so to speak. Veigar they buffed, which I find very interesting. Veigar is one of those units that if you happen to get him to level 3, he just deletes people, especially if you give him proper items, like a Seraphs or something. Like, he just has his ult and just one-shots everybody. So that's an incredibly powerful unit, and now buffing him makes him even stronger. So definitely Veigar. I mean, he fits into that sorcerer comp that I was just talking about with, you can put the Ahri for the wild, the Aurelion Sol, and then Veigar. He can fit into the Yordle sorcerers. He fits into a lot of different variants, even with like the Void Sorks. Like, he's great in that comp too. So he's definitely a unit that if you see him early on, you want to pick him up and maybe go for that level 3 Veigar. There's a lot of ways you can slot him into most team compositions and have him be very impactful. Okay, now for the items. GA and Morellonomicon were by far the 2 strongest items on the last patch, and both of them took a nerf, which is big. Now, actually, I want to mention this too, because if you notice, the one champion there that didn't get nerfed, that I think everybody thought was going to get nerfed, was Cho'Gath. But they kind of nerfed him indirectly, and I actually like this approach first, because GA and Morellonomicon were so useful, they were so good on so many people, that they said, okay, before we nerf Cho'Gath, let's nerf the Guardian Angel, and make it so you only get 800 health instead of 1,000 health on revive. So it makes it a little bit more difficult for you to get an extra ult off, unless you already have your mana fully topped off before you die. He's not going to be able to survive a whole bunch more damage, and that extra 200 can mean quite a bit. Rageblade, they buffed. Now this scares me, because this was already a decent item, and especially now with so many teams going so tanky, there's very long fights very often, and Rageblade just builds and builds and builds and builds, and all of a sudden you have a Draven at the end of the fight that can 1v4, or a Vayne that's actually a viable carry now. She's still not great, but she can be very, very strong. Ashe with this item is ridiculous if you're running Glacial. Like, it's just, this is a really, really good item that I still think a lot of people, even after this patch, people are still sleeping on a little bit. Like, I don't see it as often as I thought I would, and it is very, very strong. So definitely, if you can build one of these early and you have a carry of some sort, like a volley, it's great. Like, it's a strong item right now. I would highly recommend it. Morellonomicon, like I mentioned, got nerfed by 20%. So it went down from 25 to 20% burn damage. So that's pretty big. And honestly, it still feels strong. It still feels good. Like, I feel like Morellonomicon and GA are still both very solid items. They're just not so many leaps and bounds ahead of all the other items now. It's more of an even playing field, which is good, I think, for the state of the game. Phantom Dancer now allows you to dodge critical strikes from abilities. So I'm trying to think, like, maybe Rengar, Akali, maybe Kha'Zix, potentially. some of those abilities that were on hit effect, that were essentially like auto attack based, that allowed them to, now it allows them to dodge that, which is good. I think that should have always been the case. It was weird having a Phantom Dancer and then getting crit. It's like, but I shouldn't have been crit. I have Phantom Dancer. So that's a nice little tweak that they made to the item that I think, it's always been a strong item. I think that makes it really, really good. It's a very strong item. Runon's Hurricane. This is hilarious. They actually brought this item into the meta this last patch. If you haven't been playing TFT the last week, this is now a viable item on your hyper carry. 75% bonus damage instead of, 25. That is insane. I've seen people go the 3 Runons or 2 Runons. Don't do that. That's not worth it. But 1 Runons is your last item on Draven or something. It chunks. It does good damage. It's worth it. So something to keep in mind, if you see that Runon's Hurricane, don't be sad. It's not like it used to be where it was by far, because I think honestly this was by far the worst item in the game up until this last patch. So this was a big buff. And honestly, I don't think it's overpowered right now. Excuse me. It's strong for sure, but I don't think it's like overpowered. So I expect to see this at this point for a little bit longer to come. Static Shiv they fixed an issue where it would deal more damage than intended with less than 4 targets available, which was good because at the end of a round, Static Shiv would just delete you essentially. It would like proc all 4 of those damage procs onto one person sometimes and just instantly wipe them. So this was a nice change. It was never supposed to function like that. It's supposed to be for killing large numbers of units, not so good against one unit, much like Luden's Echo. And Sword of the Divine, chance to activate the crit is 7% now instead of 5%. Honestly, this item is still pretty bad. I wouldn't recommend building it. I still think that there's so many better items you can build with a BF Sword and a recurve bow. Like both of those items are so much more useful. They go into so many more better items that it's just not worth it. It's not terrible now. Like if you get one from like the dragon or something, it's not the end of the world. But I wouldn't necessarily throw it on your hyper carry and eat up a spot that you could potentially use for something else, unless at that point you're out of items. You're probably not going to get anything. You maybe you don't think you're going to survive another 2 carousels or even to another carousel, then sure, throw it on. It's better than nothing, but it's not a great item. And then there's some bug fixes and stuff like that, but I don't really think we need to dive into all of that. But that is essentially where the game is right now. So a lot of cool stuff. The game's really healthy. It's very balanced. It's a lot of fun to play right now. There's a lot of different comps that you can run. Draven is still very strong. There's a Gangplank carry comp that's going around right now where you run 2 Blade Masters. You can either run 2 Imperials, 3 Blade Masters. You can run Imperials. You can run Nobles. You can kind of combine it with a bunch of stuff, and you run Guardians. So you get Gangplank and not Gangplank, Leona and Braum. And it actually does an insane amount of damage. This on-hit Gangplank, it's like you put the Morellos, the GA, and then maybe like I've seen people like Skara go Yumi on it, and it's really, really good. It's pretty fun. And I've tried it out a couple times, and watching Gangplank just destroy their whole team with 1 barrel, like the fight looks even, and then Gangplank just barrel, boom, everyone dies. If you put Yumi on it too, you can go Void and then just throw 1 more Sorcerer in there, and you get the 3 Sorcerers, so that makes it even stronger. Worth trying out. If you haven't tried it out, definitely check it out, especially because right now gunslingers by themselves are not super popular, so a lot of people aren't picking up the Graves, the Tristanas, the Lucian's obviously still very popular because he's such a powerful 2-cost unit, but overall it's a comp that's much easier to get because everybody's going Cho'Gath still. Everybody's going Void and Sorcerer, and like these comps are still getting incredibly popular, and Glacial Ranger is still pretty popular as well, and so is Night Ranger, which is a slight variation. You can still get the Glacial by running the Sejuani and the Ash, but you don't get the 4, you get the 2. Still a pretty good comp. So if you haven't tried any of those comps that I just mentioned, I'd recommend looking them up. You can, there's a lot of great, like the TFT subreddit is fantastic for images and guides and all that sort of thing. So if you're not subscribed to that subreddit, definitely go check that out. It can really help you improve your game. Now, last, to kind of close the show up, let's take a look at what we think based on these Riot announced tentative changes that we're going to see coming this patch. So we don't know how much of this is going to happen. The only thing that we know for sure is going to happen, because this did come straight from Riot Games, is the release of the Hextech Champions. Now, we talked about these guys last week. If you haven't seen that video, go check it out. I kind of break down all of these different champions and give my initial thoughts and where they're going to be useful, etc., etc. So this is guaranteed to happen. because Riot wouldn't say that they're going to release that and then not do it. So we're going to have a whole new class, Origin, so to speak, in the game, which should be a lot of fun. I'm really excited to see what they do. They've already kind of changed how Hextech works on the PvE. It's no longer like a disable all items type of thing, which is thank God, because that sounds ridiculous. But definitely if you don't, like if somebody's got perfect items for their comp, you can maybe run this Hextech class and have it work out very well for you. Hush and Demon are getting reworked. So I'm curious to see what they do with Demon. Honestly, I think the problem that they have, because right now Demon's not really getting any play. And I think the issue that they're having is I think they've realized that this is going to be one of those things that's either completely broken or not good at all. And it makes sense to try and rework that a little bit to provide a similar effect, but not be so ridiculous and overpowered if it's going to be viable. So I'm curious to see what they do with it. Hush has been kind of mixed. Like, it's not a great item. It's okay on gunslingers. Like, if you have it on your Lucian, it's okay. You can silence a whole lot of people. But honestly, it's not an item you see people intentionally going for, trying to build, especially at high levels. You get it, great. It's better than nothing, but it's not a priority item on many people. I think maybe only Lucian in Gunslingers is the only comp where you would really, really want that item. So they're going to try and rework that a little bit. I'm curious to see what they do with it. They are buffing Ahri, Katarina, Misfortune, and Zed. Now, Misfortune they nerfed too strongly, so I'm happy they're doing that. Zed should make the Assassin comp a little bit more viable if he's buffed. Or ninjas as well, because he's, clearly not great right now. Like, he's okay if you can get a 2-star Zed early on, he'll put in some work for you, but he's not a super strong, like, must pick up when you see him on the draft board type of champion. And realistically, he should be pretty good at that 2-cost level. Like, I feel like he should be one of the better, especially because the Assassin and Ninja synergies are so limited. I feel like those units should be pretty powerful individually. Katarina is just, unfortunately, just bad. Like, unless you fully stack the items on her, like, you need, like, double Seraphs. Like, you need so much mana on her to make her a Beyblade and to have that actually just get her ult off and guarantee that damage. That I understand why a lot of people don't run it. Like, she's by far the worst Imperial. Swain, significantly better, obviously. Darius, reliable tank unit. Synergizes with Knights. That's great. Draven, synergizes with Blade Masters and is super, super strong still. So Katarina needs a buff. I think they need to lower her mana cost, but if they do that, they probably also need to lower her damage, because I'm assuming if we see a lower mana cost or a faster mana charge rate or something along those lines, she is going to significantly delete everybody, and you're going to see a whole bunch of Seraphs, Katarinas out there. Ahri getting a buff is weird. She's very strong. Her and Lucian, I think, are the two best 2-cost units right now. So for her to get a buff, I'm a little bit scared, especially because if you look at the opposite end of this buff list here, they have Wild as well. So they're also buffing Wild. Necessary, because Wild is pretty bad. But if you're buffing Wild and Ahri, I really, really hope the changes to Ahri are minuscule, because she's already strong. So we'll have to see what happens with her, but expect to see a lot more Ahris this weekend. Infinity Edge buffing, that's good. It's honestly a pretty, again, not an item that you build very often. It's more like a better, and game is coming now. I have a BF sword on somebody and all I have is another BF sword. Might as well build an Infinity Edge so I can stay alive or win this game. Locket, they obviously was really, really strong. So they nerfed it a couple times and now it's pretty useless. So they're buffing it up again. Maybe they're going to give more health per shield, but have it still disappear after a couple seconds. That's what I'm assuming is going to happen with that. And Redemption, this item is not great. It's really not very good. I mean, the amount of times where, because just the way that it works and the units kind of spreading out and being unpredictable, like sometimes even if the Redemption goes off, if you kill the person who, before the Redemption saves them, there won't be anybody in that circle that's taken any damage, and it just kind of heals nothing. So maybe they'll change it. What I'd like to see is either a stronger heal, or maybe it provides a shield to any unit that it hits that has full health. For at least like a percentage of its health value, right? Of its heal value, excuse me. Nerfs. Braum is honestly, like, I forget what I said about Lucian and Ahri. Braum is the best 2-cost unit in the game right now. He is so tanky. It is ridiculous. Like, you can win if you get a Braum in the minion rounds to start, just throw him out there. Like, he won't die. It's insane. And he can protect your other guys too with the shield and everything. Like, he's a fantastic unit. So I think he'll still be strong after the nerf, but this is definitely much needed. Like, he's better than Leona. And considering Leona's a 4 cost, it's a little bit weird. So I understand why they're nerfing him. That should hopefully make the game a little bit healthier, because right now Brahms can stall out games forever too. They just don't die. Cho'Gath, they finally decided, even this patch, everyone's playing Cho'Gath, so they realized the item nerfs weren't enough. They didn't want to go back and nerf those items again. Actually, they are nerfing, it's just a bug fix on Guardian Angel, excuse me, so they're not nerfing that again. So Cho'Gath will take a slight hit now. Karthus getting nerfed again. Clearly that comp is still too strong. You still see it being used a lot. 6 Sorcerers, 3 Void. It's very, very good comp. You get the Brawler synergy with Cho'Gath and Rek'Sai. Both of these units still need nerfing, unfortunately, and it looks like they're addressing that this week. And Kha'Zix. So this is a weird one for me, because Kha'Zix is honestly pretty crap late game. Like, if they're nerfing his early game only, then I just don't see why you'd ever pick up a Kha'Zix, because the only real benefit to having Kha'Zix right now is he can be a pretty strong, you get him an early two-star Kha'Zix, you throw him out there, and when there's only a couple of units and there's a lot of space on the board, he can isolate targets and kill them pretty easily. If they take away his ability to do that, this is just going to be one of those champions that you just want to avoid, and you're just not going to pick up very often. At least that's my original opinion. Obviously, I don't have any numbers or anything, guys. Like, I don't know what the values are that they're going to be nerfing or buffing or anything. So this is just pure speculation. But late game, he's not good. So if you're nerfing his early game, if you nerf his late game, he's completely, like, he's hardly ever on the board late game anyway. This will make sure he's never on the board late game. And if you nerf his early game, there's a lot less of a chance that you're going to pick him up early game, because why would you invest the gold or the time into that? Better to just try and get the units that you actually want for your late game comp, or at least, have one of those out there. Static Shiv, they're nerfing. Thank God this Ranger comp is so strong because of the Static Shivs. I mean, it's not a great composition without the Static Shivs, but if you have 2 or 3 Static Shivs, you win. Like, that composition does insane damage. So glad to see that's being brought down a little bit, although it's not really a great item on anybody that's not the 4 Rangers. Like, it's okay on a Gunslinger, like okay, sort of, on Lucian. I mean, if you get it early on him, on Lucian with a Luden's Echo, then yeah, he'll carry you to like a top 4 probably. But it's not that strong outside of that comp. But those units in that comp aren't that great. So I think that they're choosing to nerf the comp this way. Maybe they'll nerf how it stacks with other Ionic Static Shivs, excuse me. And then Ionic Spark, they're nerfing again. So they buffed it a couple weeks ago. It became pretty popular. Everybody's running it. It does it really, really well against the Sorcerer comps, where everybody's trying to cast spells all the time because it guarantees it. And it also does really, really well against Gunslingers. This is actually one of the reasons Gunslingers is not very good right now, because there's so many Ionic Sparks in the game. And for example, Lucian, who's one of your hyper carries in that, just kills himself, even if nobody attacks him. He just ults around so much that the Ionic Spark kills him. And then they're fixing a bug on Nidalee. I'm not sure what that bug is off the top of my head. And then on Guardian Angel, where I'm pretty sure what they're going to do is they're going to prevent you from stopping all of the healing. So things like Red Buff and Morello's right now, if you die, then when you spawn back up, you have no health. And I'm hoping that's what they're going to fix on that way. At least you come back with full health, or the 800 health that the GA is supposed to give you, rather than having that healing debuff apply over the time that you're dead. Also, I think that there's a couple of bugs with people. I think Kennen is probably one of the worst offenders of this, where you can kill him and his ult will remain active while his GA is proccing. So that's kind of weird, because he's doing damage while he's dead. I don't know how that's supposed to work. But yeah, guys, this is the patch that we're going to see coming through on Wednesday. Obviously, nothing is final here other than, like I said, the new champions and the new class, the Hextech Origin, which I'm super excited to get my hands on and try out, test out. I'm going to be playing a lot of that on stream Wednesday night, Thursday. So if you guys want to get a quick first look at that, feel free to come and check that out. But otherwise, guys, that's it for this week. So if you stuck with me for this whole hour, I appreciate it. If you just watched one of the segments, also appreciate it. And we'll see you guys next week. Take care.